I am here this morning with Jason Furman, the teacher of Harvard's fabled Ec 10. How are you doing, Jason?
I'm doing well.
All right, so I invited you here because I have this new book out, Build Baby Build, and you're a character in the book, as you probably know. Let me just go and show everybody what it looks like here. So I've got regulation keeps quantity low, prices in the most desirable area stay high. This is Econ 101, or Ec 10 if you're at Harvard. And then over here, I've got someone from my undergraduate days at Berkeley saying, sounds more like right wing ideology 101 to me. And then here you show up. All right, so here you are. This is actually taken from a real photograph. Um, yes, and here is your quote from, I think it was actually from a report. I don't think that was actually what you said at that press release. So does this all sound familiar to you, Jason?
Absolutely.
All right. Okay, so um, you actually teach Ec 10, so I assume you do housing with your Ec 10 students. Is that right?
Yeah, we discuss housing and the importance of supply.
All right, and what do they actually say when you go and tell them this stuff? So I assume that a lot of the students arrive resistant to the idea that you can make housing cheap by making it abundant.
I would say most people, if you talk to them a little bit about this
Mhm.
issue, they tend to be persuaded. I don't get a whole lot of I don't like capitalism, and if a business makes a profit, it's bad, sort
Mhm.
of people. I'm not sure how to win someone over if that's their view, but if you're not, you don't totally hate business, but you'd like prices to be lower than higher, I think that person generally will be persuaded when you show them both the theory and the evidence.
So remind me, so is Ec 10 required?
It is not required, although I think
Ah,
everyone should know economics. Or
right,
maybe
because I
that's a
remember that
protectionist
NANCU had
sentiment.
walkouts, and I'm wondering, gee, why are you walking out of a class you signed up for?
Yeah, well, we haven't had any large-scale walkouts while I've been teaching.
Hmm. All right. So when you're teaching this stuff, I found that a lot of students that would fit the Harvard profile will say, all right, look, fine, we could go and just allow them to do more housing. We'll allow the private sector to do more housing, allow more market rate housing. But there's just a lot more sympathy for, first of all, just public housing. Do you talk about that at all?
We don't actually talk about public housing. Maybe we should.
Mhm.
And, there is a issue of distribution. If you don't like the distribution of income in this country, you want transfers. In general, cash transfers beat any
Mhm.
particular in-kind transfers, but politically, sometimes there's more support for
Mhm.
in-kind transfers. But no, we don't really talk about public housing. Maybe we should.
Mhm. But I'm guessing you do rent control because it is at 10.
Absolutely.
All right. So, what do you say to students who just say, fine, let's just have rent control? That'll solve the problem of high housing prices.
Right. I mean, it's very easy to show in a static model what happens. You get a lower quantity
Mhm.
and you get shortages. We don't explicitly model what the dynamics are, but point
Mhm.
out over time what are your incentives to build under rent control, what will
Mhm.
happen to the supply curve over time, as opposed to just what
Mhm.
happens to it in the short run. And that's really the more serious and fundamental issue with rent control.
Right. So it's actually I've only taught Econ 1 or our, which is our version of Ec 10 once in my whole career. But my reading, when you go and explain this to people that don't know a lot of economics, their model is something like this. You naive economists think that if we're nice to business and we do them a favor by letting them build, they out of gratitude will go and cut prices. And what a fool you are for thinking that, because once they've been allowed to build, they don't need you anymore. And then they will charge the public through the nose. Like, what would you say to something like that?
I find that sentiment more around labor markets.
Mm-hmm.
And, I always have to explain, a company offers health benefits not because they're nice, but
Mm-hmm.
because they think the worker will value that at more than the cost of the company to buy it. So it's precisely
Mm-hmm.
their greediness and being in tune with what people want. I haven't come up against that as much in housing, but again, would make a similar argument that, the businesses will have no choice. I mean, this is an industry that pretty easy to understand that it's not a highly concentrated industry. There's tons of people renting here in Cambridge, tons of people renting in the United States. You can't really just all conspire together to keep prices
Mm-hmm.
high.
Right. I mean, what's particularly striking is that the places where housing is most crazy expensive are the big markets where the collusion story is hardest to believe. I mean, you can go to Lubbock, Texas, and it's like, well, there's not that many builders here. I guess maybe they could all get together. But New York or San Francisco, everyone who builds is going to be part of some collusive pool. It's a little hard to believe, or actually real hard to believe, honestly.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And there's also a demand curve, right?
Mhm.
So if you could rent, a one bedroom, 1,000 square foot in Cambridge is about $3,000 a month right now. If there was a line of people willing to rent that at 3,500, that's what they'd be renting at. Conversely, if we had, 20,000 more units of that, you wouldn't be able to rent them if you still charge people 3,000. You'd have to work your way down that demand curve.
Hmm. And then I guess probably the last thing that a lot of normal people like the idea of is let's just have an affordable housing mandate or inclusionary zoning, where if you want to build what you actually want, you also have to build a bunch of stuff you don't want. What would you tell your students about that?
We don't cover that in my class, but I would say that is
What would you tell them,
what
Jason?
would I tell them exactly? That is equivalent to a very narrow tax on one group. Moreover, the tax is applied at the margin. So for each additional unit you build for, say, a middle class family, you have to pay a tax that is effectively subsidizing poor families, that you'd much rather have the tax be more broad-based, the tax not apply to each new additional unit of market rate housing that you build. And you might want the subsidies distributed in a more fair and just way than just that.
Hmm. So I've got a tweet of yours that I want to go and share with viewers here. You did this just after, hold on. Let's see, it's right over here. All right, so you can remember this one, Jason?
Yep.
The world would be better off with less rethinking economics and more thinking economics. What is it about people that makes them so quick to want to rethink a subject they haven't understood the first place?
It drives me crazy. I mean, so many of these rethinking economics people have not thought very hard about it. Moreover, there are a bunch of ways in which there are exceptions in economics. Minimum wage, there are models in which a minimum wage can raise employment, for example, and
Mhm.
models where it can reduce it, and there's empirical evidence that finds both things. So I don't think it's all quite as simple as what some people call the introductory economics version. But in our introductory economics version, we don't just teach how markets are perfect, we teach how they
Mhm.
fail.
Yeah.
It's
Have you have
incredible.
you have you ever actually heard of an Ec 1 class that teaches that markets are perfect? Because I never. I'm just looking around. I can't find any sign this actually exists.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think that exists. Yeah, no, I shouldn't have said my class. No,
Yeah.
no class teaches that. In fact, the market failures in some ways are harder to understand than the market successes. So I wouldn't be surprised if on average people are spending more time on market failures than they are on market successes. But it just, people keep coming up with what they think of as a new theory. They didn't understand the old theory. The new theory isn't testable. It's not something that's remotely like rigorous. And yeah, it drives me crazy.
I mean, it seems to me a lot of it is more of if you say one good thing about markets, then I'm going to assume that you think everything good about markets, which is a strange view.
Yeah, no, and there's an issue that lately some really great economists have started to use this language too.
Mhm.
And, and it's sort of hard because they do understand economics, but I think they're actually basically confused in a whole bunch of their so-called rethinking of it. So,
Hmm. Gee, could I get you to name any names, or is that too sensitive?
I think we only had like 5 minutes for this.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
yeah. All
I
right,
don't
fair,
have to
fair
name
enough. All right.
names.
So, it's the last question. So, you were just letting me know that there is some move towards housing deregulation in Cambridge, Mass. Could we finish with that?
Yeah, there's a city councilor here who just is incredibly enthusiastic about supply and is really pushing forward. He got the housing committee to approve it last week, and it's not a specific proposal yet, but I expect that people will be able to build taller, that a lot of zoning requirements will go away, that you'll need to set aside a much smaller portion of your land for,
Mhm.
a yard and maybe get rid of some other rules as well. So if we here in one of the very bluest places in the country can reduce our housing regulation, then maybe some other blue places can do it too.
All right. Thanks very much for coming on with me, Jason. And thanks for appearing in my book.
Thanks for depicting me. I think that's a first for me.
All right. So have a great day, Jason. Bye bye.
Bye.